Greetings, my name's Guy Dauncey. This is the show Change the World, where I like to invite guests on from around the island who have big, bold ideas and a big vision of the future, and who are really playing with new ideas that a lot of us may not have thought about before. Today my guest is Rupert Downing, a fellow Brit from way back, who is the manager of the Vancouver Island Community Investment Cooperative and one of its founding members. And before we get into that, also chair the BC Community Investment Coalition and works in community-based economic development for 30 years.
Yeah.
And yeah, there's a lot of terms there. So let's jump right in the top. What is the Vancouver Island Community Investment Cooperative?
Yeah, well, it's a vehicle for residents of Vancouver Island and the Gulf Islands to place some of their well-earned savings and investments in local projects that produce social, economic and environmental benefits for their communities at the same time as providing them with a modest financial return.
So make that immediately practical, pull a typical project out and pitch it on me to invest in it.
Right, well, affordable rental housing is a huge need in our communities.
Agreed.
Vacancy rates are below 1%. And people are really struggling to find affordable housing.
Yes.
There are great non-profit housing developers out there who are trying to develop units for people to live in at a very affordable rent, but they lack capital. They get some capital from government, but they always need some additional private capital to be able to construct the kind of units that are needed all throughout the island in different communities for different populations. So what we want to do is raise capital from our own residents, people who have savings, who are willing to put them in to these kinds of projects, to help accelerate and scale up the number of affordable housing developments that are going on across the island.
Right.
So that's one concrete example.
So let me take my personal example. You know, I've been self-employed all my life, so I've worked to put a bit aside.
Yep.
It's currently being ethically invested with a screen for ethical investments, but it's in big, to me, fairly anonymous funds. None of it is in very local ventures.
Yeah.
So you're saying I could take 5,000 of my future pension savings and help a local group start a non-profit housing venture?
What we would do is we would take your $5,000 contribution, pool it with other people interested in our fund, put it in a GIC with a credit union so that you're at least getting a GIC rate of return every year. But then as projects come through our pipeline that are ready to receive big chunks of capital, we will place that pooled money with those projects over a 5 to 7 year period. And if we make more than a GIC rate of return, then you'll get that as well as an additional financial return on your investment.
And so what is a normal GIC rate of return at the moment?
So between 1% and 2% annually. Very modest.
Yes.
Yeah.
But a lot of pension funds are in GICs bringing that very modest return.
Well, most financial advisors will say you should have a portion of your portfolio in GICs and bonds, which are typically in that kind of range. And then part of your portfolio, put it in higher risk kind of activity.
So how long is this is a new idea, frankly, enabling ordinary people to invest our savings in local ventures, as well as affordable housing. What other kind of projects might come up?
Renewable energy is a big priority for us. We think that sector is going to take off inevitably, as it needs to globally in terms of climate change. We think Vancouver Island is well placed to look at new renewable energy technologies. Right now our regional districts are having a hard time getting rid of bio-waste, but all of that could be processed into energy if we apply some of the technologies that are up and running in Europe. We think that's a big sector that we can invest in. First Nations are investing in run-of-river hydro and solar energy. And we have a cooperative right here in Nanaimo that's very successful. Viridian, right.
We had them on the show.
Yeah, and they're doing solar conversions. And they could scale up their activities to include farms and institutions to expand that whole solar energy sector. And then there's new tidal, wind and other types of renewable energy technology that are coming on stream. So we think that's a big area to invest in. We're also looking at waste recovery. So there's too much going into the landfills at the moment. There's a whole bunch of waste streams that could be repurposed, recycled and reused. And that's another area that we're really keen on investing in.
So this sounds like the big sectoral idea approach. Do you have actual businesses coming to you saying, you know, my project is a potential
Yes.
one?
We have one in the Cowichan region.
What's
There's
that?
a company that's looking at, they already own the land for an eco-industrial park where they want to put in the technology to process food waste that currently gets barged across to the lower mainland, and process that, create energy out of that processing.
Yes.
It's a sealed system, so there's no odor, there's no other waste, and then they would use that to power greenhouses and other units on site in the eco-industrial park to produce local goods for local consumption.
So each of these projects sounds simultaneously exciting and positive and complicated and difficult.
Yes.
And if you're lending money, you've got to assess its business case.
Right.
How likely is it to go belly up or to make $1 million?
Yes.
Do you do that yourself, or do you bring in experts to do that and then pay them, and there's a costs involved in all that stuff?
We do have experts. So we have a partnership with a credit union that's called CCEC Credit Union, one of our oldest credit unions in BC.
And what does CCEC stand for?
I can't remember what the acronym stands for.
Is that the one down in Vancouver called Community Credit?
East, that's it, Community Credit.
Community Credit, yes.
Yeah, and it's in the east side of Vancouver.
Yes.
And they specialize in trying to finance quite innovative lending programs. So, for example, the Millennium program to help finance startup cooperatives.
Right.
They manage. So they kind of manage funds on a province-wide as well as
So they've
local.
got the skills to look at a business and ask the hard questions.
That's right. So they have a loan department with underwriting skills and all of that.
I can imagine if have you taken any loans? Yes, you're still at the preparatory stage.
Still,
so if you're planning to take your first 5 loans,
Yep.
it's really important that they succeed,
Yes.
or else it's bye-bye.
That's right. So that's why affordable housing is a really good market for us to look at.
It's a safer one.
Very safe.
Yes, there's not much market risk.
No, because they get the principal financing through BC Housing.
Yes.
That's about 75%, and then they just need some mezzanine financing to top that up. And usually they can exit that financing within 5 to 7 years. So people get their money back quite quickly.
Yeah.
There are no vacancies in any of those affordable rental units.
I mean, the issue I can see is simply price of land, which is like just crazy.
Yes.
And that makes everything less affordable.
Yes, but we have an aging religious community on Vancouver Island. The churches have large amounts of land.
Yes.
In the capital region, the churches probably have more land than the local government does, and those churches are socially motivated to try and see whether some of that land can be used for social purposes.
Yes, because regular housing, the mortgage market is well organized and can deal with it, right? You can go to your credit union and bank and get the finance, but for social housing and low income affordable housing, not so easy, right?
No, that's right. So that's one way of trying to ameliorate risk.
Yeah.
But the other thing is renewable energy. So the First Nations, essentially what they do is they create their renewable energy plant, and they enter into an agreement with BC Hydro over 40 years to supply the energy into the grid. So they have a 40-year revenue stream.
But to be devil's advocate, once you've got an agreement with BC Hydro, you've got a guaranteed revenue stream, and the banks will supply you with the money.
In fact, they don't.
No?
It's interesting. The First Nations that we've talked to rely on a specialized trust company back east to do their financing, and they haven't been able to get any financing from the banks. It's partly because of the status of First Nations
the ownership
under the
issues
Indian
around.
Act.
Yes, so that gets complicated.
Yes. But if you've got a power plant that's up and running, it's renewable, it's got a guaranteed revenue stream from BC Hydro because it's plugged into the grid, that's a pretty safe proposal.
So I know that the run-of-river, it's been quite controversial with some people.
In some cases,
there's a run-of-river over on the Sunshine Coast, which has got more salmon and more fish returning because of the pool they put in and the way they did it.
Yeah.
And you've certainly got a guaranteed revenue stream. Now, solar energy, it's still currently like a 20-year payback for the individuals investing in it. It's probably, but I was told, according to mathematics, if over the life of that energy, where the price of BC Hydro's energy is rising all the time, they said it's a 5% return on investment. So it can look good.
The maths is closing down every year and making it look more affordable and more like a good investment. So
well, tidal energy, because I worked a lot in the energy field, is still like 30 cents a kilowatt hour and still out there on the edge of it.
Yes, it is. Sook First Nation have installed an Australian technology which is wave wave energy
really?
generating.
Oh.
It won't generate profit and won't generate energy into the grid, but it will reduce the costs of their sustainable shellfish farm, which is one of the largest on the island.
Right, so they're doing that to a contract to themselves, a local utility, not with BC Hydro?
That's right.
So
it
they
reduces their input cost
right.
on their sustainable shellfish business, which makes that more profitable.
Right.
And so we can invest in that together with the energy supply that they have.
Yeah.
And it's a nice value chain all through their
and I discovered
project.
recently that with my pension that's in Canada Pension Plan, they're investing in the LNG plant on the Saanich Inlet to do natural gas, big project at Bamberton,
yes.
which some of us think is not a good idea.
Yes, absolutely.
And so it's frustrating. So to know that you can invest your savings on the island is something that's making a difference.
Yeah, and
to me is the ultimate in socially responsible green investment.
Right, and the lens that we have for all of our investments is that there should be social benefits, environmental benefits, economic benefits to local communities, and
yes.
a private financial return at a reasonable risk.
So why are credit unions not doing this already?
Well, there are some that are sufficiently large that they do on the margins of their business. And so Vancity does that, Assiniboine in Manitoba,
yes.
And there's a couple in Quebec and Ontario. It's very much on the margins of their main business, which is retail, which is a retail banking service and savings service for their members.
But they have to lend them. So are you saying that 99% of their loans are out in mortgages?
Yes,
mortgage lending.
That's pretty much how I would see it. And there might be a few outliers where it's a little bit different. It's more like 10% or is kind of being reinvested in more innovative ways. But they're really not geared to doing this kind of business.
And what about banks like TD Canada Trust or Royal Bank? Do they invest in small businesses like this?
No, not in any large scale. Some of the large banks are looking at impact investing and trying to redirect some of their investment portfolio into impact investing.
But explain to our viewers what impact investing is.
Yes, of course. Yes, the jargon gets complicated.
Yes.
So I mean that it means that the money is actually consciously being invested in ways that create some kind of social, economic, or environmental impact, according to a lens that has metrics that actually measure what those impacts are.
Which banks are looking at that? Do you know?
Royal and CIBC, I think, both have some activity in that area, but they tend to be at the $100 million scale, not local. They're not interested in local.
Right, yeah, that's kind of massive, yes. But I know there's a bank in Holland called the Triodos Bank.
Oh, yes.
Started in the 1970s by people who are actually following the philosophy of Rudolf Steiner. Yes. And 100% of their investments are in what they call regenerative projects, local energy projects, local farming projects, local cooperatives and stuff like that. That's everything they do is based on this philosophy.
Yeah. And that's the kind of philosophy that we have. And we have restricted ourselves to Vancouver Island and the Gulf Islands because you've got to start somewhere.
No, it makes sense. It makes sense. And there's also people identify with their region where they live.
That's absolutely, and can point concretely to something that they've contributed to.
And you can meet the people and know and feel. I often think that the labourers who actually build roads and houses, and they're on one level but every time they drive past it, they must think, I did that.
Yes, that's exactly,
The sense of pride in the work you've achieved,
yes,
right?
Yeah. And right now on Vancouver Island, every year $500 million leaves the island in individual savings and investments by our residents.
Holy moly, if I'm allowed to say that on air, that's like $500 million.
$500 million every year.
Of our savings that's leaving the island and doing nothing for the island economy.
Not 1 cent. And British Columbia wide, that's the figure every year is $4.5 billion. So if we could just take 2% of those capital flows and reinvest them for community benefit, think what we could be creating as an alternative approach, one, to financing, and two, to actually creating a sustainable, resilient local economy for our people.
So how many of you are the players in the Vancouver Island Community Investment Cooperative who are helping make this vision happen?
Well, right now I would say on our list of people interested, we have about 250 people that we've built up over the last 2 years since we were founded. And of those, about 30 have stepped up to become paid members of the cooperative,
right,
to be actively involved in the development of its work, with a board of directors that then brings that together. We have, and the board has to be made up of up to 9 people. So
as members, they attend the AGM, they can vote on issues, they can help direct the whole future of the thing.
Absolutely.
Right.
And we're about to do a membership campaign across the island to try and recruit more people as we're getting ready to do our first capital raise.
So does membership mean you're not quite buying a share, you're a member of the co-op, you're an equal? Explain it to me.
Yeah, so co-ops should have to issue actually a membership share. For us, it's $250, which is redeemable at any time, and it's a one-off membership.
And that sounds like a lot compared to joining a local group. But you're talking a financial investment co-op, so you want people with the potential to put in the $5,000 or the $10,000.
Yes, and who are kind of serious about helping shoulder some of the work.
Vancouver Island is full of retirees.
Yes.
So who are sitting on a lot of money. So
and whenever we will have community meetings in different, in the Cowichan and in Comox and the Capital Region and out on the West Coast in Clayoquot, etc. Usually when we have those meetings, we've had a few over the last 2 years. They're packed out with people. Wow. People are really interested. Yeah. So in Victoria, we booked a hall for 50 people. We had 250 people turn
enormous.
up.
That's well done.
And it's a standing room only.
Wow.
So I think there is a market and there is interest.
Yes.
What we have to do is put together the business plan so that people can really see that we're concrete, that the risk is mitigated. That's why we brought in a credit union partner to do all the due diligence. And that's what we're currently working on, is making sure we've got a really good business case.
So how soon do you think it'll be before you sort of put up the sign and say, projects, come to us and let's look at you?
Very soon. I hope that we can put out a proposal call in September.
Oh, right.
As the manager, I'm the prospector. I go out and I kind of try and find where the projects are that are looking for capital.
So instead of looking for gold in the ground as prospector, you're looking for gold in people's business plans.
That's right. and we've had no trouble really finding some really interesting projects like Viridian, as you've mentioned, and then some of these First Nations projects and some of the recycling companies that are kind of really trying to innovate, and the affordable housing groups.
Well, right here in Nanaimo, I nearly said Vancouver, here in Nanaimo, the Beeman Park Food Share Cooperative wants to build a big new year-round farmers market, and the 5 acres farm down in Harewood want to also buy the land and have a permanent project, raising food for people. So maybe they're candidates for this. Yeah,
farmers markets for sure have quite a good business case if they think year-round and they think a certain scale.
Yeah.
So we're very interested in the whole agri-food sector is really interesting.
So on top of this, there's data that shows that when people are asked, do they think the current economy is working properly? 80% are saying, no, it's not working properly. We need something new.
Yeah.
And is this a part of the new economy, do you think?
I think so. We really talk about it as building a more people and planet-centered economy.
Yes.
And our colleagues down in South America have been talking about that for some time.
Yeah.
And working very hard on their agenda. We know in the European Union that there's some excellent examples. And really it requires a number of components, I think, in terms of building a new approach to the economy. I mean, one is making sure that we can buy locally and ethically.
Yes.
So the whole fair trade mixed in with local as a focus. The other thing is dealing with employment and making sure that we're providing training and opportunities for work experience and upskilling for people who are currently marginalized in the labor market. So social enterprises that help train and employ people are an important component as well. But then the bottom line is, where do you get your money?
Right.
So you have to have a socialized financial system as well.
Instead of a financial system with the banks, not the credit unions, but fundamentally extracting interest from people to pay the shareholders.
That's exactly what they do. So that's exactly what's happening to us in our region, is that really all of the benefits of the financial system flow to shareholders in large corporations and in large wealth centers.
So I know in America there's a lot of what I call community development financial institutions. And I believe, if I'm right, the first one was established when people were living in a mobile home park or a trailer park, and they were suddenly told, you're gone, you've got to leave. And they were able to organize to buy, I think it's Massachusetts has a law that if the residents have first option to buy the land if they can get it together within 45 days.
Yes.
So now we're talking very low-income people. How can you find that? But with an organization like yours can help them buy the land and turn their mobile home park, instead of being a rental thing, into a cooperative ownership thing.
Yes.
And that's now well established as a system of doing things.
Absolutely. CDFIs, Community Development Financial Institutions, in the States now hold over $50 billion in assets.
50 billion, and so that would be the equivalent of 5 billion for Canada, because we're 10 times smaller.
Yes.
And how much, are there equivalent institutions in Quebec and the Maritimes?
Maritimes, yes. So Nova Scotia has been doing this for 12 years. They have what their version is called Community Economic Development Investment Funds.
Okay.
They have about 75 million in assets after 10 years of growth. About 50 of those funds spread out all over rural and urban Nova Scotia, and they have a tremendous success rate. The Nova Scotia government gives them big tax incentives for residents to place some capital, and they're RSP eligible as well. So residents see as a big advantage to putting some of their savings in these funds, and they're financing renewable energy, agri-food, all kinds of local enterprises that create employment.
So they're a big learning source for you, because they've been doing this for a while. You can see, have they made big mistakes that you can learn from, and they've adjusted their method?
Yes, they have made mistakes, and they have.
And I always say, if you're not making mistakes, you're not trying something new. You're not doing anything. You've got to make mistakes.
Right. I agree. And the best one, and people can Google this and have a look at them, is New Dawn Enterprises on Cape Breton. And so I spent several weeks out at New Dawn, basically walking alongside all the people.
Did you get
involved.
to meet Father Greg MacLeod?
Yes, I know Greg MacLeod.
He's now passed, I think.
Yes, he's passed, yes. I knew Greg, and...
I always had a little thing in my mind, because I knew that the Catholic thing comes in, that if the Catholic priest says, my son, you need to invest in this project, they think, if I don't invest, I'm going to go to hell.
Yes,
so you put the money in, right?
Yes, I don't think Greg did that quite, but it definitely, yes, it's a thing there. And Rankin McSween is the head of New Dawn.
Right.
We brought him out to Victoria 2 years ago to talk to people about their experience.
Did you film his talk? You can put on your website?
Yes, we've got some video of it.
You should put it on the website. Let people.
I will do that. Thank you. Yes, and he's like 6'6", big. New Bretoner.
Does he play the fiddle as well?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. And he jigs and everything.
Prejudice is wonderful. Like everyone in Cape Breton plays. When I was in Cape Breton, it certainly seemed that everyone was playing the fiddle.
Yes, yeah. And so they've done a tremendous job at regenerating a really depressed economy on Cape Breton, and they've been very innovative about how they do it.
Wow.
And so we can learn from people like that, and organizations like that.
Do you think it's because they're smaller scale, like they're in Sydney or something? Would it be sense to focus on just the Duncan Couchen area or the Nanaimo area to get started, to get local people more local?
The problem with that is that's one of the lessons from Nova Scotia, is that it really is tough for volunteers to create something fairly complex at a very small scale.
Right.
And so that's why we've chosen at this point to go for a Vancouver Island wide scale.
Okay.
In the future it might be that, yes, we do federate a series of smaller funds focused on a smaller area.
And by the volunteers, you don't mean the volunteers in the project, you mean the volunteers to manage the whole thing.
To manage the whole thing.
Yes,
that's right. And so we want to try to start in a scale that kind of makes sense and means that we'll have some early successes that people can learn from, and some that may not be so successful. We do have other co-ops, investment co-ops around BC starting up.
Right.
After we did the initial research with support from the Real Estate Foundation and Van City, produced a how-to guide on community investment, which people have now used in other places to create their own versions.
Where else? In
Sunshine
BC?
Coast,
okay,
and Creston Valley in the West Kootenays.
Okay.
There's one in Vancouver that's just focused on agri-food.
Right.
And then there's a couple of others that are being kind of started in other places.
Wow.
So we have a coalition of our groups to learn from one another, and also to lobby the institutions and the provincial government in particular to create the same kind of enabling and incentiving of this kind of community investing at their levels.
Before we run out of time, what is the website? If someone wants to, like me, look at becoming a member,
yes,
and taking out a $250 membership share with a view to investing $5,000 down the road, what is your website?
It's www.communityinvestmentcooperative.ca.
So we'll get that put up, communityinvestmentcooperative.ca. We'll have it on the screen, right?
Yeah, and they can also contact me at my email address, which is info@communityinvestmentcooperative.ca.
Fantastic. 5 years down the road, if you have everything goes well, how would you see it happening?
Well, I would hope that we'd have raised at least $5 million from local people, placed it into our fund, Community Impact Fund, and probably got between 7 and 10 projects financed that are making a real difference, spread over different communities across the island and the Gulf Islands. So that's not just Victoria or not just Nanaimo, but different projects, different scale, and fitting different communities.
Do you expect that an individual member's typical investment will be $5,000 or $10,000?
5,000 is the target, but we also think we can probably attract some institutional investment from maybe some larger interests.
So what's the mathematics of 5 million investors in 5,000 units? Something I can't
remember. It's 200 at 5,000 makes $1 million.
Okay, so 1,000 people, 1,000 donors.
Yeah.
And that's, we have 750,000 people on the island, and 95% of them are retired. No, that can't be right.
Not quite.
But, have you done a community town hall in Parksville, Qualicum area?
No, we haven't been there.
Good area, lots of retired people coming up there.
Happy to be invited, yeah.
And especially since the sense of connection to the place you live.
Yes.
The fact that you can and a lot of people of our kind of age, we're getting on there. Yeah. Frankly, we're getting concerned that the younger generation, the millennials, I think have it a lot tougher than we did growing up.
Yes.
They're having to pay through the nose for their college education. You and I growing up in England probably had it, free.
Free, yes.
They're both having to work to pay the mortgages. They're struggling harder. And if our generation can help them, that's got to be good.
Absolutely. It's making that sustainable livelihoods for people in our communities.
Well, look, thank you for being a leader on this.
Thank you.
I would love to come back in a year's time, not in 5 years' time, and sort of see how this is progressing. So my name's Guy Dauncey. Time has run out on us. This has been the show Change the World. My guest has been Rupert Downing with the Vancouver Island Community Investment Cooperative. One of my contributions is this book called Journey to the Future. It's a novel set in Vancouver in the year 2032, when exactly this kind of thing is happening, to show how we can build a better world. And if you join me in our belief that we have to build a better world, tune in next week, more good guests, and thanks for watching.